Welcome to the Diversity Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Kratz. I am thrilled you are here with us today. Our purpose is to share stories, ideas, and tools to help you on your diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. Let's meet this week's guest. Welcome back, listeners. I am so thrilled to have two guests today on the show. One, Chris Moore, who is CEO of FIRST, a global nonprofit community that empowers students to become science and technology leaders. Chris has 25 years of experience leading youth-serving organizations and creating extracurricular access for youth nationwide through programs like Positive Coaching Alliance and the United States Youth Soccer Association. We also have Dr. Janell Catlin, and she is the Senior Director of Equity, Diversity and Inclusion. Ooh, fun. I like how they put the E first at FIRST. And she has nearly 20 years of experience as a global STEM educator, researcher, teacher, and advocate of access to STEM education for all learners. Chris, Janell, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. So happy to be here today.
Well, I'd love to just start with y'all's personal journeys, what a rich background you all bring to the DEI conversation and just to the purposeful work you do with youth and getting folks involved in STEM. Can you just tell us a bit, start with your story, Chris, of how you got into this work and why it's so important?
Well, again, thanks for having us, Julie. I joined FIRST in November of last year, November 2021. And as you noted, I joined from an organization called Positive Coaching Alliance, which is the largest youth sports training and content development organization. PCA transforms or seeks to transform the culture of youth sports. And it doesn't take you that long to look at the world of youth sports today and make the determination that sports in America is broken, right? Parents are fighting on sidelines. They're fighting with teams, opposing coaches from the other teams or referees or what have you. So that's why PCA exists, to change the culture of youth sports. Prior to that, I had worked as the CEO of United States Youth Soccer Association, the largest youth participatory sport in the country. If you have children out there, then you know that soccer is what we call a gateway sport. It's the first sport that kids can actually participate in from the time they can take their first steps, because all it requires is for them to kick a ball and run around, get exercise, have fun. And so, and then prior to that, I had worked for several years in the for-profit space and worked in marketing and global business development organizations. And so throughout my journey in nonprofits, and by the way, I should have also noted that I worked on a collaboration with the National Football League called Fuel Up to Play 60, which is the largest in-school health and wellness program in the country that teaches kids how to eat healthier, exercise for 60 minutes a day. And that program happened to be endorsed by former First Lady Michelle Obama. And so I had prior to coming to FIRST, about 12 to 15 years of experience in nonprofits. And so when I learned of the opportunity to join FIRST, an organization that prepares young people for the future by helping to build their skills in STEM literacy, and also the soft skills that FIRST teaches around how to become a leader, skills like teamwork, collaboration, problem solving. It dovetailed with a lot of the work that I had done throughout my career in nonprofits. And so that's what really excited me about FIRST. I was drawn to the mission of the organization, and we're doing wonderful things to prepare young people for careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And then just on a personal note, as we'll probably get into, this is an area that I struggled with as a kid for a multitude of different reasons, particularly in the area of mathematics. But I'm really excited to be here, and we're doing great things to change the lives of youth
Oh, what
all across the
purposeful
country.
work, Chris. What a cool story. Janelle, I'd love to hear your story as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I've been at First now for about 2 years, and I've been in the STEM, equity, diversity, and inclusion space for what I would say over 20 years. My career started off as a biomedical researcher working for pharmaceutical companies, and I was always very passionate about science. But I also come from a family of educators. And so I was bitten by the bug of education, and decided to go back to school to pursue a doctorate in science education. I worked with students in the Bronx in New York to really understand what motivated them to learn and engage in STEM. And during that time, I was just so excited to blend my passion for science and for education. And so, over the past 20 years, being able to work in science, being able to work with pre-service teachers as a teacher educator, having the opportunity to work with students and teachers around the world has been just such a passion of mine, and something that I'm so excited to be able to do right here at First. And so our work here at First to ensure equity, diversity, and inclusion for all of our students and all of our mentors, nearly 700,000 students and nearly 300,000 adults, is so critical to ensure that we're providing that opportunity for all to be welcome and that everyone can be a part of First.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. Well said. Beautiful stories. And STEM, when I think about that acronym, it was only maybe 5, 6 years ago that I first heard this acronym, right? And I appreciate Chris spelling it out as science, technology, engineering, and math, correct? And sometimes people slide in the A, I think, for arts. I've seen that version too with STEAM. Um, Tell us why this is such a problem, especially when you put the lens of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion on top of it. Why, what is the current state of STEM with regards to diverse representation and inclusion?
So we know that historically marginalized groups based upon race, gender, and socioeconomics have been historically marginalized in STEM or underrepresented in STEM. And so for us at First, as part of our mission, is to ensure that we are creating space and access for all students to have the opportunity to engage in STEM. We know that diverse groups of people have the opportunity to come together to solve the world's most challenging problems. And so when we think about connecting the dots in terms of what we're doing here at First, providing an opportunity for all students from around the world to engage in STEM, in school, through our class pack programs, outside of school, through our team engagement, for example, we are providing a space for those students to have the motivation, to have the opportunity to work with one another, to collaborate with one another, so that they can pursue STEM as a future career. But I would say, and another part of that, an additional part of that, is that we're essentially creating global citizens. And when students are mindful of the world's challenges, not only the challenges that are in their own backyard, they're able to see that we are all interconnected, and that what happens in one place affects where you are in another place. We're also very fortunate to have Fortune 500 companies in industry who really work with us to think about, well, what does that next generation of STEM leaders look like? What can we do to connect with these companies such as 3M, Disney, for example, Raytheon Technologies, so that we're not only creating the space for students for all around the world to engage in STEM, but that there's a welcoming place for them once they have the opportunity to attain a STEM job.
And if I could build on Janell's point. So FIRST, which by the way stands for recognition, for inspiration and recognition of science and technology, has been around for more than 30 years. The FIRST movement has been quietly building to prepare young people for whatever life throws at them. And when you consider the fact that we have taught more than 2.5 million young people in over 100 plus countries around the globe, we're doing that to basically teach kids how to solve any problems that they face. And so we engage students ages 4 to 18 in mentor-based programs that, using robotics, helps to build their STEM capabilities, as well as their self-confidence, communication, and leadership skills. And as you know, Julie, these skills are very much in demand right now. Companies, when they're sourcing and recruiting talent, they're looking for skills like collaboration, communication, problem solving, creativity, and innovation. And that's why diversity, equity, and inclusion matters. It can help companies evolve, innovate, and increase their own global competitiveness by employing diverse teams of people who can work collaboratively to help solve some of the world's most complicated problems. And it also fosters increased employee engagement. So if people feel like they're valued, they're listened to, it creates an overall more positive work experience and culture. And that's what FIRST is doing as far as preparing young people to do. Our programs have proven effective in terms of boosting students' interest in STEM and related career paths, especially among young women and those from historically marginalized communities.
I love that. I love that. And, two things that pop out in what you said, Janell, about being a good global citizen. I mean, that is so important for youth to recognize. As a mom of a 8-year-old and a 2-year-old, I hope that they learn more about the world and our, kind of ethnocentric view that at least I grew up with in school. And then building up on what you said, Chris, these human skills of collaboration, communication. I hear that so much from companies I work with. Like, we need more of those skill sets, right? And so I'm just so curious about thinking about it from a corporate perspective, as many of our listeners are in the corporate spaces. If they are in a STEM industry or just interested, I mean, every corporation could benefit from attracting more STEM talent, and they're not seeing it today. I think you're making the business case for you need to go earlier in the education cycle, right, and make those partnerships so that when kids do start thinking about their careers, then they think of you. So for a corporation that wants to be more active in STEM and with historically marginalized communities, what might be some recommendations on things they could do to get started?
So one of the things that we do in terms of our work with industry partners, corporate partners, is to really say, okay, what kind of space are you creating in your corporation so that it is welcoming to all? There's one thing to inspire and to motivate diverse folks to engage in STEM, but what have you done once they get there and they don't feel welcome? So in order to do that, it's important for companies to really think about the equity, diversity, and inclusion training that they have for managers, that they have for all staff, that they are creating spaces for employees to come together through, for example, employee resource groups. Chris talked a bit about this in terms of employee engagement. And for us at FIRST, being able to connect with employee resource groups and have employees engage with our students as mentors, for example, is truly inspiring, because when students can see themselves in adults who are in the STEM field, that's even more inspiring for them. I think it's also important when companies are thinking about, well, how is it that we connect with underrepresented groups? It's important to reach out to institutions, colleges, for example, minority serving institutions, historically Black colleges, tribal colleges and universities, women's universities and colleges, so that those recruitments can happen in that space, so that you're creating that direct opportunity for folks who have been underrepresented in the STEM fields to have that opportunity to attain a job within a STEM company.
I would also say that there needs to be this higher level recognition of the fact that equity, diversity, and inclusion is both internal and external, right? I mean, there are a lot of companies who've mastered this, they've gotten it right. But then there are some who unfortunately, based on where they are in their journey as an organization, have relegated ED&I or DE&I, depending on which acronym you use, as just a set of policies, or as a slogan, or a set of bullet points that they post on their website, right? It's not. It's more than a platitude. Yes, it's internal. It's your hiring practices. It's, you know, what does your board composition look like? What are your staffing ratios look like? But it's also, to Janell's point, it's about sort of your external orientation, and it speaks to what you believe in terms of the degree to which your programs are reaching those in underserved communities or in historically marginalized communities. And so I would just, encourage companies, as they're thinking about equity, diversity, and inclusion as a philosophy, as a set of policies and practices, to think both internally and externally, and also reaffirm the fact that it should be part of your DNA and who you are as an organization, and speak to your core values, because then that's going to drive what you do outside of your headquarters and outside of your organization to the external world.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing y'all say, not just external, not just internal, but both. And make sure you have an inclusive work environment, because there's no point in attracting diverse talent, especially if you're starting earlier, like you are with kiddos. Like, that's a long life cycle before they can become employees and consumers of your product. So, really think about your long-term commitment and work on that culture piece too. Janell, I'm just so curious, because equity first in your title, and we have so many different acronyms we've unpacked on the show. JEDI, DIBS, DEI is obviously the most common, D and I, I don't know if I've seen E first before the D and I. Tell us more about why that's first.
So equity, when you think about it, it's really the heart of the work. Oftentimes when we think about how is it that we can make the world a better place, the word equality is often used. But just because something is equal does not mean that it's equitable. And so when we focus on equity and put that front and center, it really does allow us to be mindful of the work. But at the end of the day, for us at First, although our acronym is ED&I, and we do know that DE&I is most known, the importance is the work of equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Yeah. I think about kind of one of those myths that people have when they're entering this conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they'll say, well, we treat everyone equally here, or everyone's equal. I think everyone's equal. I don't see, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, of course you do see those things. And it doesn't mean you treat different people differently based on those things. But the more we continue to treat people equally, the more we perpetuate the very problems that we have, right? if we treat everyone equally and they don't have the same resources, then we get more of the same and we perpetuate privilege. So flipping that, I think that's a big shift that we need to make as a society to see things from an equity perspective versus an equality perspective. And there's just, I think, a lot of opportunity with kiddos. I know I grew up with, a colorblind narrative, a myth of meritocracy, pull yourself up by your bootstraps narrative. Like all this is very well baked into my upbringing. And then it really took quite some time for me to undo that, to unlearn that, to relearn, to do a lot of my own education, as I know a lot of DEI leaders have to educate themselves. There's no necessarily curriculum or way to create this shift. And so we're all scrambling to kind of help figure out tools and resources to create that mindset shift. And I'm a big fan of starting earlier. That mental work that I had to do. So doing my best here with my family, but I wonder for our listeners that are struggling with how do I get involved in my local community more, especially with folks that are underrepresented or underserved? I don't want to be a savior, right? I don't want to go to a place where they may not want someone like me. How do I engage in my local community in a way that would feel good, feel like a good, helpful way to show up as what I call an ally?
So in terms of our work here at First, volunteers make it happen, right? When we think about our mentors on our teams, our world championship events, it's really the volunteers and certainly the students, but the volunteers that help us to reach our goals. And I myself, I like to volunteer. Volunteering has always been something that I've been passionate about. And what's really important is to do things that you are passionate about. And so when we're thinking about, well, how can we do something in our local community? Well, we would certainly love for folks to become volunteers at First. And so please check out our website and sign up and see how you can get involved locally. But we're also still in the space of coming out slowly of this global pandemic, right? And getting to a new sense of normalcy. And what I've seen in my own local community, many volunteers helping at local food banks, for example, as one place, for example, to be able to help others. And I think, Julie, what you mentioned just in terms of, no one wants to have this feeling or hindrance of thinking, oh, am I coming in as a savior or no? And we don't want students to feel tokenized as well. So when one is truly passionate about the volunteering that they want to engage in, when one is truly, the intentions are honest, if you will, about being able to take that time to give back, then I would encourage one to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, find a way to plug in. And you mentioned, just thinking about COVID and everything we've been through over the last few years. I think what we've seen with the Great Resignation and the corporate space is that people really want purposeful work. And I think that's a bit daunting too for an everyday person that might feel like, hey, I'm just crunching widgets or just doing this one thing. How is that really changing the world? Well, what a great platform y'all have to volunteer in, to participate in, to find an organization where you can support a bigger purpose and calling, because that's really kind of the awakening at the same time when we can physically be, more together. In a lot of places, not always, but we recreate those communities that we've missed for so long with connection. Just in kind of wrapping up today, I'd love, Chris, Janell, for you both to share what's one thing, if you could offer one thing that someone can do to really show that they want to be an ally to underrepresented communities, or one aha you've had in your own learning journeys in this impactful work you're doing. I'd love for you just to share a dose of inspiration, if you could, with our listeners. Chris, do you want to start?
Sure. So thanks again for the question. So let me just maybe personalize this a bit and just share just my own, awakening or journey. When I was growing up, particularly through middle school and high school, I was an above average student, but like many kids, I found math and science to be quite challenging. My parents separated when I was really little, and my sister and I were effectively raised by a single mother household where my mom took great care of us. She provided for us, but the problem was she worked nights, and it was really difficult to get help with homework when my sister and I needed it. We didn't have extra resources for a tutor. So a life-changing moment for me was when, of all people, my middle school teacher told me, you know what, Chris, math just isn't your thing. And that I didn't have a place in STEM. In fact, she told me, you're a good communicator. I see you as a news anchor or a DJ. Which at the time I thought was pretty cool to be a news anchor or DJ, frankly. But so she encouraged me to consider other subjects. Now, if I had known then what I of course know today as a business leader and as an advocate for education, youth development, and the social emotional well-being of youth, I would have understood not only that I was being deprived of a different future, but that when we give students access to new experiences and the support they need to be successful and to persevere, we create unrivaled opportunity and empowerment. And honestly, when she told me that I wasn't good at math, it actually became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I actually believed her. And honestly, I stopped working hard at it because I knew it was a futile effort. So discouraged and unconfident, I threw myself into sports and other academic areas more in line with, the quote unquote so-called skills, with my so-called skills. I quickly found success, but throughout college and into my professional career, I always had this feeling that I was not good enough, that I was STEM incompetent, and honestly, I wasn't all that bad in science. I just lacked interest, just from that experience with the teacher, and particularly in the science that required math, mathematical equations like physics and chemistry. And so by the time I graduated college and ultimately graduate school, I knew that I could do or could become virtually anything I wanted, but more importantly, I was determined to never again allow someone to impose upon me their beliefs, their opinions, or their perceptions of my ability or my aptitude. I was lucky in the sense that I came to this realization, albeit belatedly, but unlike many kids who encountered what I had, unfortunately, they may lack the ability to succeed, in the face of those types of comments. So,
Yeah,
so
like you said, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and
that's
watch what you
exactly right.
say to kiddos. And I'm just guessing that story, Chris, probably had some bias in it, and possibly just some, discrimination there too. And that happens a lot to kids of color. Um, and so just being really careful about the messages we're sending and sometimes not sending, because kids, we internalize those. We absolutely believe that, especially from a credible source like we would think a teacher to be. So thank you for sharing that story. Janelle, what would you like to leave our listeners with?
Thank you, Julie. Well, so one of the words that you mentioned, ally. And we know allyship is so important and so critical. In my own story and career journey from scientist to where I am now in my career, I oftentimes had mentors who looked like me, but oftentimes had mentors who did not look like me. And when you think about the importance of allyship, it's not just someone standing on the sidelines, but the way that I like to think about it is someone who's truly invested and they're in the trenches with you. And so I was fortunate enough to have folks who believed in me many times when I didn't believe in my own self. And I'm grateful to be able to have had those experiences because they allowed me to have a chance in STEM, right? And to be in the role that am in today, where I'm able to help others to achieve their dreams and their goals. And so I just want to leave your listeners with the thought that, you can be an ally right now, on your job right now. And what that looks like is being able to stand up when you see an injustice, being able to support a colleague when you know that they need support in order to ensure that the playing field is level. Being able to volunteer in your community and support those who would like support. And so allyship is something that, oftentimes the title ally is not self-given, but a title that is bestowed upon someone. And so when you're acting in that space and being able to give truly from the heart, that title is something that one can earn.
Yeah. Yep. Earned. Yeah. It's not a self-proclamation. It's in the eye of the beholder, just like you said, Janelle. This has been so awesome. Thank you for this rich conversation. Chris, Janelle, tell us, how can our listeners connect with FIRST, and what are some things they can do to support this important message?
Well, first of all, thank you once again for having us here and to speak with your listeners. So to learn more about FIRST, your listeners can visit FIRST's website at www.firstinspires.org, and we'll be happy to find ways for them to join our movement and get engaged in the very important work that we are doing to build, to create pathways really for young people to pursue careers in STEM. And so we would love to have you.
And you can also find us on our social channels via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.
Oh, fun. Well, thank you again for being on the Diversity Pivot podcast. So thankful for the wonderful work y'all doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Allies are necessary for positive change. If you are on the journey to becoming an ally, we invite you to participate in our brand new Lead Like an Ally online program, or get a copy of our new book, Allyship in Action, available on Amazon. Both are helpful tools that meet leaders where they're at and help provide tools for professional and personal settings. Head over to nextpivotpoint.com to get started today.